evening. I'm Teresa Skubik, and this is Forum Daily for Wednesday, March 5th. We begin tonight with an update on the trade war between Canada and the United States. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau spoke with his U.S. counterpart today following the American government's imposition of devastating tariffs on all Canadian goods, effectively sparking a trade war. Shortly after the call, U.S. President Donald Trump took to social media saying that Canada has not convinced him that our border efforts are enough, but that the call ended in a friendly manner. The president also seemed to accuse Mr. Trudeau of trying to hold on to power because the prime minister couldn't say when the next election would be. President Donald Trump stood before a joint session of Congress last night to discuss his first few weeks in office. But before anything could get started, House Speaker Mike Johnson was forced to remove Democratic Congressman Al Green for consistently heckling the president.
Finding that members continue to engage in willful and concerted disruption of proper decorum, the chair now directs the Sergeant-at-Arms to restore order. Remove this gentleman from the chamber. Members are directed.
Soon after he began, the president announced that the U.S. will be, quote, woke no longer, and touched on the debate of trans athletes and DEI policies.
We've ended the tyranny of so-called diversity, equity, and inclusion policies all across the entire federal government and indeed the private sector and our military. Country will be woke no longer. We believe that whether you are a doctor, an accountant, a lawyer, or an air traffic controller, you should be hired and promoted based on skill and competence, not race or gender. Very important. You should be hired based on merit. And the Supreme Court, in a brave and very powerful decision, has allowed us to do so. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. We have removed the poison of critical race theory from our public schools, and I signed an order making it the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female.
Mr. Trump doubled down on his push to welcome Greenland into the U.S., highlighting that it's necessary for global security.
And I also have a message tonight for the incredible people of Greenland. We strongly support your right to determine your own future. And if you choose, we welcome you into the United States of America. We need Greenland for national security and even international security, and we're working with everybody involved to try and get it. But we need it really for international world security, and I think we're going to get it. One way or the other, we're going to get it. We will keep you safe. We will make you rich, and together we will take Greenland to heights like you have never thought possible before.
And the president also claimed that other countries have significantly higher tariffs on the U.S. and that this isn't fair.
If you don't make your product in America, however, under the Trump administration, you will pay a tariff, and in some cases, a rather large one. Other countries have used tariffs against us for decades, and now it's our turn to start using them against those other countries. On average, the European Union, China, Brazil, India, Mexico, and Canada, have you heard of them? And countless other nations charge us tremendously higher tariffs than we charge them. It's very unfair. India charges us auto tariffs higher than 100%. China's average tariff on our products is twice what we charge them. And South Korea's average tariff is 4 times higher. Think of that, 4 times higher. And we give so much help militarily and in so many other ways to South Korea, but that's what happens.
However, Donald Trump's Commerce Secretary hinted yesterday in a Fox News interview that there could be a pullback on tariffs against Canada.
He's going to come out today angry that Americans are still being killed. Now, both the Mexicans and the Canadians were on the phone with me all day today trying to show that they'll do better. And the president's listening because, you know, he's very, very fair and very reasonable. So I think he's going to work something out with them. It's not going to be a pause, none of that pause stuff. But I think he's going to figure out, you do more and I'll meet you in the middle some way. And we're going to probably be announcing that tomorrow. So somewhere in the middle will likely be the outcome. The president moving with the Canadians and Mexicans, but not all the way.
And this afternoon, he announced that he's granting a 1-month exemption on tariffs for U.S. automakers amid fears that the trade war could harm U.S. manufacturers. The announcement comes after Mr. Trump spoke with the leaders of the big 3 automakers, Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis. And on the subject of tariffs, Senate Majority Leader John Thune was asked by the press yesterday evening about the impact tariffs will have on his home state of South Dakota, given the state's heavy focus on agriculture. Mr. Thune somewhat justified the tariffs, but did appear to partially break rank with the administration and said he hopes that tariffs are temporary.
I think these tariffs are oriented around a specific objective. In this case, to reduce the amount of fentanyl coming into this country across our northern and southern borders. And, so these tariffs, I think, are hopefully temporary. Obviously, I come from a state that is, our #1 industry is agriculture, so we care a lot about being able to export. A lot of our product in South Dakota hits the export market. And trade is an important part of our economy in our state. So I pay a lot of attention to it. This is clear to me something where the president, who, by the way, has used this tool in the past to get a specific outcome, is trying to achieve that again. And in this case, it's to reduce the amount of fentanyl flowing into this country across our northern and southern borders.
But these are not temporary. These are long-term. If prices continue to go up, will you stand by the president through and through on this?
Well, what I'm willing to do is give the president some latitude to try and accomplish the objective he seeks to get done here. I think, as you know, I'm a different place on tariffs probably than some of my colleagues and certainly maybe the administration. But at the end of the day, it's really about trying to achieve the desired result, which, as I said, is very clear in what the president's trying to get done here. And hopefully, when it's all said and done, this won't be something that will create a lot of disruption to the markets in states like mine, South Dakota, where we very much are dependent upon agriculture.
China issued a warning on Tuesday night that it stands ready for any type of war with the United States in the aftermath of tariffs imposed hours earlier by the Trump administration. A spokesperson for the Chinese Foreign Ministry said that the tariffs would not lead to a resolution of U.S. concerns about fentanyl originating in China. The spokesperson added, quote, "If the U.S. has another agenda in mind, and if war is what the U.S. wants, be it a tariff war, a trade war, or any other type of war, we're ready to fight till the end." NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is saying that the tariffs enacted by U.S. President Donald Trump are, quote, "probably the worst economic attack on our country," and is calling for an emergency session of Parliament.
Given the gravity we're up against, I'm calling on an emergency session of Parliament like we had in the pandemic. What we're witnessing could be worse than the pandemic and very likely will be worse. But Canadians are ready to fight back. And so my promise is we should fight back as well as elected officials. So an emergency session of Parliament where we do 3 things. One is we need to put in place supports for workers. Workers are already impacted. We need immediate supports. And I'm calling on EI to be immediately reformed so it is covering enough workers. It's a sufficient amount to cover people's bills, and it's quick. People can get it quick enough so that they can actually come in and support them. Secondly, we need to create good jobs in Canada. And so that build Canadian, buy Canadian plan at the federal level needs to be there so we can build more and create good jobs in this difficult time. And finally, I know while the Parliament doesn't need to be recalled to put in place the retaliatory tariffs, I believe we should send a united message as all leaders and all parties that we stand united together, opposed to these tariffs, and we're going to impose these retaliatory tariffs with a unified voice, denouncing Donald Trump's attack on our country. This is a time that calls for us to step up, to be united, and to fight back. And so I'm calling for an emergency session of Parliament to do exactly that.
All right, stay tuned. Coming up next, we'll be joined by Dr. Moshe Lander to explain the impact of counter tariffs on Canadians. Stay with us. Forum Daily will be right back after these messages. Yesterday, the Prime Minister announced retaliatory tariffs on $30 billion worth of U.S. goods coming into Canada. This morning, we were joined by economist Dr. Moshe Lander on what this means for Canadians.
So I think that the politics are two wrongs make a right. But the economics says two wrongs makes a bigger wrong. And that's the problem that we're going to have then with the Canadian public, is that they want somebody's head on a pike. They're baying for blood. And so if the Americans could dare to do it to us, let's go do it to them. So the first problem that I have with the story is we both import and export from each other about $500 billion worth of goods and services. Our economy is around $2 trillion. Their economy is around $30 trillion. So how does $500 billion resonate with each of the two sides? For the Americans, for every $100 of economic activity, even if we stop purchasing the entirety of American goods and services in the name of patriotism, it would amount to about $1.50 out of every $100. So imagine you have $100 in your pocket and $1.50 is missing. Would you turn the place upside down to find the $1.50, or would you merely move your keys, check under a couch cushion, check between the car seats, and then say, I just need to be more careful in the future? Like, is it going to cost you sleepless nights, a gnashing of teeth? Are you going to shake down your kids or your loved ones to see if the $1.50 is with them? Probably not. But in Canada, $500 billion out of $2 trillion is about $25 out of $100. And so you bet that it's going to affect those people and that they're going to lose sleep and that they're going to be much more disturbed about it. So it's not that we don't need the U.S. or that the U.S. doesn't need us. We both need each other, but to different degrees. And so when we're putting counter tariffs on the U.S., we think that somehow it's going to hurt them, resonate with them, make them ashamed in a way that we feel hurt by their tariffs on us. It's not going to register. And that's if we stopped the entirety of purchases from the U.S., given the fact that there's some thus that we have to buy no matter what. We're missing the mark then. And so I get the politics, but unfortunately, it would have been much better if they just explained the economic case for this is why we don't do anything. Now, set that aside. Once the tariffs are here, somebody has to pay the tariff. At the end of the day, it's a tax. So somebody has to pay this tax. Now, the issue is it going to be the Canadian consumer, or is it going to be the American producer? And in this case, it comes down to a concept called elasticity. So the best way to understand it is, let's say that I put a tax, let's not even talk tariffs. If I put a tax on insulin, who's going to pay an insulin tax, the diabetic or the pharmaceutical company? You bet it's going to be the diabetic, because the pharmaceutical company is going to say, look, pay it or die. I don't care. The diabetic doesn't have the ability to push back on the pharmaceutical company, say, no, you eat the tax, I'm not paying this, because the pharmaceutical company has so many other things that they could be doing with their time and resources. The insulin production is just one of them. So in that leverage discussion, all of the leverage goes to the producer. If, on the other hand, I were to put a choice on President's Choice Cola, so with my apologies to the Loblaws family, if I were to put a tax on President's Choice Cola, you're not going to be able to pass even a nickel of that onto the consumer, because the consumer is going to say, if you try and pass even a nickel onto me, I'm going to go buy Coke or Pepsi or some other no-name brand or Barq's root beer or Fanta orange or milk or juice or water. I have so many options. I don't have to pay your tax. You eat the tax. And in this case, then, the price wouldn't change for the consumer. It's just that Loblaws would now receive less money because they're the ones that have to pay the tax. So when we're putting tariffs on American goods and services, it's really going to come down to, is the Canadian consumer the diabetic, or are they the PC Cola drinker? And so in a lot of the cases, we're more diabetic than we are PC Cola drinker. And that means then that more of that tax is going to be shifted onto us than we care to admit. Not all of it is going to fall on the American producer. They have the leverage in this negotiation. And so it's not necessarily that we're going to see prices go up 25%, but there's no way that we're going to be able to escape seeing some price increase. Now, Canadian consumers might say, I got the perfect solution. I'm just not going to buy the American good at all. I'm going to go buy the Canadian good, and I'm going to show my patriotism and my love of Canada by giving them my business. But you're presuming that the Canadian business has idle capacity, that they can easily ramp up production without any consequences. But what if that Canadian business is structured in a way that they're expecting a certain number of consumers, and all of a sudden Canadians start showing up saying, I'm here too? We now have then the production equivalent of a Taylor Swift concert. If there's only a fixed number of tickets and then a whole bunch of fans start showing up, it's not Taylor Swift adds concert dates. She just increases the prices of her tickets. So if Canadian businesses take a Taylor Swift approach and say, I can't give you more of what you want, then all I can do is just charge you more for what I'm offering. Well, Canadians then have accomplished effectively a tax on their own behavior by going to buy the Canadian stuff. So in that case, they're going to eat the cost of the tariff just by their own consumption decisions. So they need to be careful then about the way that they behave. This is a case then where the tariff could still land on them.
And since inflation is still a concern for many Canadians, we asked Dr. Lander if our counter tariffs could cause inflation to rise.
100% it's inflationary. So it's inflationary in the form that to whatever degree the prices get passed through from the American producer onto the Canadian consumer, that's inflationary. And that if we try and change our behavior and go to capacity-constrained Canadian producers, we create our own inflation. And so at this point, then, the inflation is coming from multiple sources, some of it of our own doing. And I don't necessarily think that Canadians have thought through the consequences of their decisions. It's just that they merely jumped with their emotions. And I'm all for patriotism as long as you understand the consequences of your action. If you're prepared to constrain your limited disposable income even further by only buying Canadian, hey, there's nothing wrong with that. I just don't think a lot of people have thought about it.
And NDP MP Charlie Angus says that this isn't a trade war, but rather a war of disinformation, comparing President Trump to Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Once again, he's huffing and puffing and threatening to blow our nation away. And like last time, as soon as Canada stands up and shows that we are not afraid, suddenly the MAGA crew start backpedaling and maybe there's going to be a deal in the works. Maybe they're going to have something figured out. Maybe, maybe not. I'm not here to give anyone false hope because Canadians understand that this is not a trade war we're talking about. This is a war by other means. A war of disinformation and ridicule, questioning our right to exist, our sovereignty, our borders, very much the way Vladimir Putin launched his disinformation war in the years leading up to the brutal invasion of Ukraine.
Mr. Angus continued by stating that what we have seen in the last 60 days is that the president has burnt up the great American century.
But I want to compare what's happening in Canada to the dumpster fire USA. Because what we've seen in just 60 days is that Donald Trump has burned up the great American century. He's burned through his alliances with key allies. He's burned through Americans' leadership role on the international stage with his disgusting attack on President Zelensky and his willingness to put America on side with North Korea and Russia. So this is how the great American century ends. It's not with a bang or with a whimper. It's like some kind of tacky roadshow from the World Wrestling Federation.
The MP ended his address by telling Donald Trump to do his worst because it's, quote, elbows up time.
So I want to thank everybody who's been pulling their load and to say to them, whether or not this tariff war ends tomorrow or whether Donald comes up with some bogus reason that he's scored a victory, you know what's at stake. This is just the beginning. The next 4 years will determine our future as a nation. And I know the Canadians will be strong. Because as Winston Churchill said, we will mete out for you everything that you try to throw at us, and we will go one step further. Donald, you do your worst, because Canadians will do their best. We are true, north, strong, free, and it's elbows up time. Ladies and gentlemen, Canada will never bend. We will never kiss the gangster's ring.
Yesterday, when asked about the prospects of Canada limiting energy exports to the U.S. in response to Mr. Trump's tariffs, Bloc Québécois leader Yves-François Blanchet said that Canada should resist the urge to, quote, show muscles and say strong words.
I am far from being certain that threatening the United States not to supply them with electricity is such a good idea. We've got to keep in mind that after the crisis, they will still have to be business partners. They will, or we want them to keep buying our electricity. So it seems a strange idea to me to threaten them of being a bad partner, not so reliable partner to them. It's not such a good idea. And we have to keep in mind also that for long periods of time, we buy more electricity from the United States than we sell. So we have to be careful. Sometimes, I understand, that in a crisis, we want to show muscles and say big words. But sometimes it's not the best thing to do.
All right, coming up, both the U.S. and Israel reject Egypt's plan for post-war reconstruction in the Gaza Strip. Stay tuned. Forum Daily will be right back after these messages. The U.S. and Israel have rejected an Arab plan for the post-war reconstruction of the Gaza Strip that would allow for the 2.1 million Palestinians living there to stay in place. The proposal, endorsed by Arab leaders at a summit in Cairo, is their alternative to Donald Trump's idea for the U.S. to take over Gaza and permanently resettle its population. The Palestinian Authority and Hamas welcomed the Arab plan, which calls for Gaza to be governed temporarily by a committee of independent experts and for international peacekeepers to be deployed there. This morning, former Israeli member of parliament, Dr. Einat Wilf, joined us to explain why Israel has rejected the deal.
It's quite simply not a plan. It basically says everything stays in place, nothing changes, and we want tens of billions to flow again to the Gaza Strip, as if the previous round of tens of billions of dollars was not used in order to turn Gaza into an integrated weaponized landscape for the purpose of carrying out the October 7th massacre. I mean, if you read it, it's a ridiculous non-plan because it basically says we're not responsible. There's no responsibility. As usual, it's like we're only victims and the world owes us tens of billions of dollars and nothing needs to change. The rejection is quite simply for the fact that this is a non-plan that assumes zero responsibility for what they've done. To go back a bit. Hamas is not some independent organization that hijacked a people that had nothing to do with it. Hamas is merely the executive arm of the Palestinian ideology of no Jewish state from the river to the sea. Any leadership whatsoever, independent experts, technocratic people of Gaza, will be a management of a people who continue to believe that it is their highest duty to so-called liberate Palestine from the river to the sea. I am on record for years now, because I listen to Gazans and to Palestinians and to what they say, of saying do not give $1 to any Gazan reconstruction unless you know that the ideology of the people of Gaza is finally that Gaza is their home rather than a launch pad from which to, in their words, liberate Palestine from the river to the sea. And I knew for years that all the money that was flowing into Gaza was being used to build tunnels. I have tweets, essays, lectures that say that, because when a people's ideology is that Gaza is not their home, but that they are fifth-generation refugees who will one day take back, in their mind, Palestine from the river to the sea, you are guaranteed that any dollar, any euro, any yen that goes into that strip will be used to weaponize it. So if you don't want to be stuck in a loop of endless war and reconstruction, and that's what the Arab non-plan does. The Arab non-plan is designed to keep us in this loop of war and reconstruction. This non-plan basically does what the Arabs have done very well for the last century. Every time they attempt to destroy the Jewish state and fail, they demand a redo. They demand to go back to the same position they were before they tried to destroy the Jewish state in order to try again. So if we are ever to break out of this cycle of war and reconstruction, where the reconstruction is essentially re-weaponization, then we need to ensure that the ideology that gave birth to the weaponization, that ideology goes away. And the Arab non-plan doesn't address the ideology. On the contrary, I read it, and I think I'm going to publish soon an Arab plan translation into Palestinianist language. When they say the inalienable rights of Palestinians, they mean return no Jewish state. When they talk about the historic injustice, they mean the existence of a Jewish state. When they laud UNRWA's mandate, they mean return, and return is what the Arabs did on October 7th. So what they're saying throughout this document is, we want a redo. And the message should be, no, we are finally going to break this stupid, deadly, violent cycle of a century where the Arabs are never allowed to lose and the Jews are never allowed to win, and the Arabs can always get a redo. And the cycle needs to be broken, and there has to be a clear sense that the invasion and massacre of October 7th has consequences, and the Arab non-plan has zero consequences for their attack.
Now, one of the major criticisms of Mr. Trump's plan is that Palestinians would be removed from Gaza with no clear stance if they would be allowed to return. We asked Dr. Wilf if Mr. Trump's plan to relocate Palestinians solves her objections about ideology.
Beyond any other criticism, this is my main criticism, is that if the people of Gaza leave, and many do want to leave, but they leave carrying with them the ideology that they've been groomed with since birth, that there should be no Jewish state and it is their highest duty to rid the world of the Jewish state, then as we know, when the PLO was in Tunisia, they will continue to promote that ideology, which is why, much more like Nazi Germany or Imperial Japan, the message has to be that the ideology has to die so that the people can actually live. But it's very clear that any kind of reconstruction has to be based on a complete transformation of the ideology on all the structures that sustain it. So, for example, one of the interesting responses to the Trump proposal was, oh no, you cannot relocate Palestinians from Gaza because Gaza is their home. And I'm thinking, great. Can we have that on record? Because this is the first time in the last 75 years that the Arabs have said that Gaza is their home. Because for the last 75 years, they claimed that they're not home, they're fifth generation refugees, and that they believe in a non-existent right to settle in Israel and to conduct a massacre like October 7th in the name of that return. So can we at least begin to lock in that Gaza is their home? That would already be a massive, important contribution to begin to chip away at the ideology that I've come to call Palestinianism, this singular obsession with the non-existence of a Jewish state. So the condition, the minimum condition for any dollar to go into Gaza, for any bag of cement, is that the ideology dies. No one in Gaza is a refugee. There's no return. And it's a win-win condition. Either they accept it, and thereby we have made a massive step towards peace and a real two-state solution where one of the two states is the Jewish state, or they say no, and thereby they have no means, no dollars for the re-weaponization of Gaza.
Canada's spy agency is sounding the alarm over the Arctic, which is developing into an attractive, strategic, and vulnerable destination for foreign adversaries. A new Canadian Security Intelligence Service report says that the environment, critical infrastructure, economy, and geopolitics are factors making the region vulnerable to foreign threats. The brief Issues and Vulnerabilities in Canada's Arctic is the most extensive public account to date of the spy service's concerns about espionage and harmful foreign influence in the North. The U.S. tariffs have been factored into the BC budget announcement, which will record a deficit and send billions in trade war contingencies. Finance Minister Brenda Bailey says there are defenses against Donald Trump's unjustified levies on Canadian goods, which risk tens of thousands of jobs and tens of billions in economic losses for the province.
During the most consequential time in BC in generations, a time that few of us could have imagined just a few short months ago. These unjustified tariffs could put tens of thousands of British Columbians out of work, significantly impact our province's finances, and cause economic harm to people and businesses on both sides of the border. While our economy is built to withstand this threat better than most provinces, the impact may still be severe. Budget 2025 is about standing strong for British Columbia and making sure public services are there when we need them. Now is the time to focus on what really matters to our communities and the people of our province. It is time to protect the essentials and prepare for what comes next. Mr. Speaker, no matter what challenges we're facing, one thing will always remain true. We will never back down from our commitment to the people of British Columbia.
The BC budget's deficit tops $10 billion for the first time, as well as $4 billion in annual contingencies for each of the next 3 years to cover unpredictable costs. All right, don't go anywhere. Up next, Liberal leadership candidate Mark Carney defends Canada's economic interests following Donald Trump's imposed tariffs. And former Prime Minister Stephen Harper accuses Mr. Carney of taking credit for steering Canada's economy out of the financial crisis over 15 years ago. More news right after the break. Liberal leadership candidate Mark Carney strongly defended Canadian economic interests following U.S. President Trump's imposed tariffs. During his speech, Mr. Carney highlighted that it's important that we focus on what we can control.
We have to focus on what we can control. And what we can control is our own economy, how we build this economy, how we build the energy sector here in Alberta and across the country, how we build new trade corridors across the country, whether or not we have one Canadian economy as opposed to 13. We can, and just on that last point, and I'll hand to the next question, we can do more good, we can do more positive by having one Canadian economy than all the damage that President Trump can do with his tariffs, potential tariffs. So obviously we welcome if progress can be made, but at the same time it underscores we should do what we can here at home to build.
When asked if Mr. Trump's intent is to cause an economic collapse in Canada, Mr. Carney stated that Canada's economy is stronger than the American economy.
Our economy is very strong. Look, this is a serious situation, and it will cause pain to our workers, pain to our companies, pain to our economy for a period of time. My government, if I am Prime Minister, will do everything we can to alleviate that. But we're strong. We are strong. And I would say as well, our economy is stronger than the American economy.
And former Prime Minister Stephen Harper is taking shots at the Liberal leadership frontrunner Mark Carney. Mr. Harper has accused Mr. Carney of taking unearned credit for steering the Canadian economy out of the global financial crisis more than 15 years ago. Mr. Harper appointed Mr. Carney to run the Bank of Canada at the beginning of the 2008 financial crisis, but he says that it was the then finance minister who made the hard calls. However, an aide to the late finance minister, Jim Flaherty, is defending Mr. Carney against an attack by the former prime minister. Mr. Flaherty's director of communications during the financial crisis says that trying to erase Mr. Carney's role in the response for partisan reasons is, quote, beyond disgraceful. Conservative strategist Anthony Kosh joined us earlier for more on the controversy.
Yeah, so what we know right now is that Mark Carney is a liar. And you don't have to take it on this particular topic. Look, just another one today. You see the latest flip flop. 7 days ago, almost to the day, he was talking about how weak Canada's economy is. And then yesterday, he was talking about how not only is Canada's economy really strong, but it's actually stronger than the United States of America's. And then similarly, he was no longer chair of Brookfield when they made the decision to move their headquarters to New York until it turned out that he actually was and that he needed to be more precise. Then he said that Canada was responsible for the majority of semiconductor exports to the United States of America. And then it turns out we're actually responsible for something as low as 0.8% of semiconductor exports to the United States. So here's a guy who doesn't know what he's talking about half of the time or distorts, changes mind, and lies about what he's talking about the other half. So I'm not particularly worried about this particular circumstance. It wouldn't be the first person someone exaggerates their role in something, and it won't be the last time either.
We also asked Anthony about Mr. Carney's UK and Irish citizenship, because when Andrew Scheer was leader of the Conservatives, many in Liberal caucus criticized Mr. Scheer for having 2 passports.
Well, yeah, here's the thing, right? I mean, when Andrew Scheer was running for prime minister back in 2019, there was this pop-up where everybody found out he actually had an American passport and was an American citizen. And liberals ripped their shirt off, screaming that this was like dual loyalties, and by virtue of that, he needed to rescind his passports. Now, Mr. Carney has 3. He's a Canadian citizen, an Irish citizen, and a citizen of the United Kingdom, so a British citizen. He's already indicated to the press that he's in the process of rescinding or leaving those passports to the side and becoming an exclusive Canadian national. Now, I'm sympathetic to the fact that in Canada we've got people of multiple different backgrounds who've lived in different countries and may have accrued some citizenships along the way. But I do believe that the position of prime minister in particular is especially unique, and the person that occupies that role should be a Canadian first, but also a Canadian only. So we'll see how quick he is with rescinding those nationalities, but I do think that it's the right move. The same way I thought it was the right move for Andrew Scheer to do the same thing in 2019.
We also talked about the Liberal leadership race and the party's announcement that 400,000 members were registered to vote.
Here's the thing, about 400,000 people actually voted in total in the last Conservative leadership election. This was 400, and keep in mind, in Conservative leadership races, everybody has to pay to actually become a member of the party before they're allowed to do so. In the Liberal Party of Canada, it's free. It's basically an email, an address, and a hyperlink. But it's interesting to note that even though the original top line number was 400,000 people had signed up to vote, up until I believe yesterday, something only like 80,000 people had actually gone through the second verification process and actually cast a ballot. So right now, we've only got a few more days left where people are eligible to be voting. It seems like, first of all, the number of people who signed up is kind of low for a process that is free. People weren't willing to invest 5 minutes of their time to sign up to vote for the next prime minister. But even beyond that, of the people who actually did take the 5 minutes, it seems an even less or much reduced portion of even those people is motivated enough to do the next 5 minutes to actually cast their ballot. So it doesn't seem like there's too much enthusiasm or excitement over in Liberal land right now.
NDP MP Nikki Ashton spoke to the media to demand answers regarding Mark Carney's involvement with Brookfield Asset Management.
Today, we in the NDP are calling on Mark Carney to come clean about his role in Brookfield's exploitative practices. Did he help Brookfield dodge taxes? Canadians deserve to know. In 2021, Brookfield Asset Management dodged a jaw-dropping $6.5 billion all on its own, according to Canadians for Tax Fairness. In 2021 alone, Canada lost $30 billion in corporate tax revenue to offshore havens. This means that 1 in 5 of all the tax dollars corporations diverted from the Canadian public came from Brookfield alone. With the tax dollars Brookfield hid in offshore accounts in Bermuda, we could have invested in healthcare, affordable housing, and desperately needed infrastructure on First Nations. Today, we are calling for tax fairness to strengthen our sovereignty and our fight against the American administration, bold action that will begin to reverse the hollowing out of our economy and the inequality and vulnerability many Canadian workers face because of that hollowing out. This also means taking on Trump's American billionaire buddies and their companies who work here in Canada without paying their fair share of taxes, if they pay them at all.
NASA's 2 stuck astronauts are closing in on finally returning to Earth after 9 months in space. Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams expected to be gone for only a week or so, but Boeing's new Starliner capsule had so many problems getting to the space station that NASA decided it was too dangerous to carry anyone back. A capsule bringing their space station replacements will lift off March 12th, with Williams and Wilmore to return home a week later. Ontario Premier Doug Ford says Canadians should give Wayne Gretzky a break. The hockey legend has come under fire for supporting Donald Trump, including by wearing a Make America Great Again hat. Mr. Ford took a moment to defend Gretzky as a patriot who loves his homeland.
He's the most patriotic Canadian there is anywhere on the planet. You know, as other Canadian athletes go down to the U.S., they hand in their Canadian passport and get an American passport to pay lower taxes. You know, I talked to Wayne the other day, and he was so choked up talking to me. You know, he is a patriot. He loves Canada. He never gave up his Canadian passport. So, you know, folks, give the guy a break. Just give him a break. He loves Canada. He loves it like no tomorrow.
A poorly planned music festival, which became such a fiasco that it spawned 2 documentaries, is now being rekindled. The website for Firefest 2 promises unforgettable performances on a tropical island off the coast of Mexico. But no set list has been announced yet, and tourism officials say they haven't heard of Firefest 2. One official says that for them, it's an event that doesn't exist. A buck-toothed llama that spends his days comforting chronically ill children at a North Carolina camp is the world's oldest llama in captivity. Guinness World Records recently announced that at 27-year, 251 days old, the selfie and snuggle-loving llama called White Top has dethroned Dalai Lama.
White Top came to camp back in 2006 and was donated by some really lovely people. He's been here almost as long as camp has been open. White Top starts his day out with a big bowl of his favorite food. We provide hay throughout the day to him. Since his time here at camp, he's provided lots of camper interactions. Often our campers who come to camp have never met a llama and are nervous to have him in their face like he is, but he's actually super, super sweet. Petting White Top and being around White Top can provide sensory input for campers who need that. It's also just really cool because his fur and the way it feels. He also loves to take selfies with them. And so that provides moments that they can share with other people. And also just for the awareness that not all llamas spit on you.
I'm Teresa Skubik, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. For more news on demand, you can always visit our website at forumdailynews.ca and make sure to follow us on our social media handles. You can also watch all of our commentary programming on the News Forum YouTube channel. Good night, Canada.